Also, the girls who were on Dateline in 2020, they are lying.
How do you know that? Did your daughter mention something about it?
Because I'm looking. No, I didn't. The first time I thought, oh, you're just being judgy, Kim. Just look again. Like, I'm just wanting to see them being bad. But then I'm looking like, no, they're lying. They have created a narrative to protect something or somebody or themselves, and they are feeding it around. And what they're realizing is they're putting themselves in so much more danger. And there's families who could go years with never finding out what really happened. Wow. I do think that Brian was a mastermind. I do not believe he was alone, because the information first given to my daughter was that there were 3 people there.
And this was at what time were the 3 people there? At 8 a.m. or at night?
When apparently when the murders happened, but
around 4 a.m.
Maybe Dylan thought they were just going to be shaking them up for the money.
So the 3 people standing outside was at 4 a.m, and one was a creepy guy. I think I remember hearing that one was creepy.
Yeah, they just call him the creeper. There's a lot of creepers that hang out there. I don't know. I think there's more questions to be asked. Mm-hmm. Some lie detector tests to be taken. I know they don't hold up in court, but they certainly work well to get, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's more questions to be asked. Mm-hmm. Some lie detector tests to be taken. I know they don't hold up in court, but they certainly work well to get, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the only one who passed one is that Brian, because he's such a sociopath.
And when Brian was arrested, the first thing Brian said was, oh, was anyone else arrested?
Well, what I do think is the reason he wanted to be extradited so quickly is because he's got something, he knows every single thing that these kids have done. When they felt like they were being watched, stalked, they were being watched. They were being watched diligently. I believe he's been in that house before. I think my understanding is he had been in the house, but he was a creeper and they kicked him to the curb and wasn't allowed to come back. That is what I think happened like a few weeks prior.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
They were being watched diligently. I believe he's been in that house before. I think my understanding is he had been in the house, but he was a creeper and they kicked him to the curb and wasn't allowed to come back. That is what I think happened like a few weeks prior.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
And I've told the police that. And that is because I've gotten that from the girls, because if they're not partying there and they're just getting this narrative from, but it's still really, the towns are pretty small together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty connected. So it's like being on the same campus. It's just 5 miles apart, right?
Mm-hmm. So your daughter mentioned that a few weeks prior, someone was kicked out. That was a creeper. Like, is that just something you heard from your daughter?
That she just thinks, she doesn't, she was told it was the creeper. And people would come to buy there, and they were like this 30-year-old, it's like they're like 25 to 30-year-olds that don't belong in college, that have record. And it took me forever to get the police. I called every day for almost a month. And I do know a mom tried every day for 15 days. She had spoken with Ethan at 2, or her son had texted Ethan at 2 a.m. He was at Ethan's memorial service. They were good friends. Ethan had texted her at 2 a.m. She knew, so this kid knew where he was at 2 a.m. And it took like 15 days, she said, to get somebody to call them back. They were so buried. And so I just called every day. And when I called the president of UI, because I thought I'm just going to call him, because I'm not hearing back and I need to know he's heard my information. I don't need to know what's going on. I need you to know what I know, because I do believe it. I think it's relevant. And why would I make it up? I mean, or why would my kid make it up?
Yeah, no, and the fact that there's multiple kids who experienced that, it's not just your daughter making this up. There's like multiple kids that got the phone call.
It's a rabbit hole sometimes when you're not getting anything from the police and you know things aren't adding up. I mean, 1 and 1 is making 12. Come on. It has to balance out. It has to make sense. And I can't help but think, if I was a parent, I'd be thinking nothing is making sense. And it's being taken all these places where probably it's just the simplest explanation is usually the explanation, right? in life, but there's a lot of things in it, a lot of lying, and these kids are lying like crazy. I can't believe they let them come home for Christmas. And that's what I said to them. I said, are you seriously sending my kid home for Christmas? I know I lose here, but if they're Greek on either campus, you keep them there. A SWAT killed the guy December 15th.
Yeah, the Brent Kopaka.
So, my son, he came downstairs the day that the affidavit came out with the probable cause, and he said, Mom, the map doesn't work. Like, the paint doesn't work. Wazoo is a walking campus. I think Moscow's pretty, you walk a lot in Moscow too, but, so they know the roads and they know all of those things and where their phones work. And there's really no range in Pullman. I mean, there's more range in Moscow, truly, than there is in Pullman, but, he spent like 15 to 20 minutes outside of the apartment where that guy was shot, where he supposedly lived, at the Coffee House Apartments. What was he doing there? Was he picking him up? And I don't think he worked for Pullman's, he was security. I thought he worked in tech at UI Tech, or the tech department at University of Idaho. But I could be wrong there too. They changed the story, they changed the person after the first day of putting it up. But why did he want to kill his roommates? And why was he living with two students if he's 38 and not a student? And is this Brian guilty actually, but going to get off because it's going to turn it on him? Because I think he's got something up his sleeve.
It's just, I can't wrap my head around the fact that, because we all thought at 11:58, the roommates woke up, saw the carnage, called the police. No, they were awake 4 hours earlier, and that is huge. That's not in the affidavit.
Yeah, when I called her, when we got the alert at 5 o'clock, and I called her, my husband called, and she had all of she knew, right? And I think it hadn't sunk in what had happened yet, so she was giving it to me fresh, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, she knew. She'd known since, 10.
Since 10.
Gone by around 9, between 8 and 9, 10, somewhere in there, because I never saw her. But she supposedly was there. And this is a narrative she fed to my daughter and to whatever friend group she sent it to in Snap. And I don't know, I assume everybody else got one too. But I think they were creating a narrative. And I feel it more so because of what they had put on too. And it was on Twitter, I think, where they had posted, but I think it's gone. And I did not screenshot it, which I wish I would have. I don't know if you can pull Twitter back. I think they can pull everything back, but the consistency is that I think there are kids on there that are trying to say this is something different than it's coming out as, but I think they're really afraid. People have to start talking.
Allegedly, supposedly, because all of this is actual first-hand factual information.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
Allegedly, supposedly, because all of this is actual first-hand factual information.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
I know.
Right.
I wish I never knew anything. It was never, I don't want to be discovered. Honestly, how long did it take my face to come out? And it's come out so many different ways. Honestly, probably nobody would even know me if they met me.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, from what I understand, people were on, I think, 6 different people. I had gotten 6 different people that they thought were you, and I would get other YouTube videos emailed to me, and they're like, I think this is her, and she's saying that this is her name, and there's a strong Wisconsin accent in it, and I'm like, I don't think that's her.
Go farther east.
It's crazy. And for those that are asking about who Luke Carter is, again, we talked about it in the beginning of the show. One of her buddies pranked her on this. And she don't know how to take it off. They named her somebody named randomly Luke Carter. If you guys go out there, try to find a Luke Carter, please don't bother them. They have no idea what's going on. You know what I mean?
No clue. My YouTube site, and I have followers. I'm like, guys, I'm really letting you down because I'm not putting any content on here. Why are you following me? But you can find me under WSUMOM Kim, and that is me. I promise.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
According to them, they'd only been broken up for about 3 weeks. So a week after that, we're looking at isn't that around the amount of time that Brian Koberger, they said in the last time frame that he was seen in and around that area, the last 12 days. Now, Brian Koberger, they said in the last time frame that he was seen in and around that area, the last 12 days. And Brian Koberger, they said in the last time frame that he was seen in and around that area, the last 12 days. Now, the connection, and we're going to talk about the connection. We're going to talk about I'm only bringing this out now because the source from News Nation that I'm sure that they were able to verify and vet has some similar accounts to what this person who put this video on YouTube is claiming. And so, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I want to add a couple of things so before we move forward. News Nation also had a source who stated that Ethan was attacked in the hallway, and that Xana's injuries were very severe to her fingers and things of that nature. This account doesn't account for the type of screaming noise you would consider or would think you would hear. But let's get into the content. Now, real quick, back again. I did speed up the audio because it was painfully slow. I think it was actually even slower than I think it was slowed down. I sped it up to almost 1.5%, and it ends up sounding pretty normal to me. But if it sounds fast to you guys, that's probably why. It's because I sped it up. I just wanted to put that out there real quick.
To screw Dylan and give you a brief background as to who I am. So my girlfriend is in Dylan's inner circle. And by inner circle, I mean inner circle. Like they've hung out almost every day since the incident occurred. And I've seen her a plethora of times as well. So you're going to notice I'm not going to use words like allegedly, supposedly, because all of this is actual firsthand factual information.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
Where should I start? To clear things up. First of all, there's a lot of misconception about Dylan suffering from PTSD or trauma or any of that. None of that is accurate.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
In fact, when we try to console Dylan after the incident, she's the one that was laughing at me and my girlfriend and I, talking about we're so weird, and we tried to give her a hug and stuff. She's the one that was laughing at me and my girlfriend and I, talking about we're so weird, and we tried to give her a hug and stuff.
Bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
She's had a rough life growing up. She's been through a lot. She doesn't have PTSD and didn't suffer any trauma. The incident that night, and what I'm referring to with the feds actually put a lot of words into her mouth that she didn't say herself first. So there was a lot of leading statements that they were insinuating to her. and she was really scared the first few days.
A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit.
Obviously, after the incident occurred. So, like, the reason none of it makes sense in the affidavit is because it didn't really happen that way. So she never stood there shocked when she saw the individual. Like, the reason none of it makes sense in the affidavit is because it didn't really happen that way. So she never stood there shocked when she saw the individual. She was just standing in her doorway, like, like anybody who opens the door. It was just, she opened the door and yelled at Ethan and Xana, and who she thought was their friend. She yelled at them to be quiet. It was just, she opened the door and yelled at Ethan and Xana, and who she thought was their friend. She yelled at them to be quiet. That's what was going on with that situation. And she just went back into the room. She locked the door like usual, and went to sleep. Everything was quiet after she yelled at them, so she didn't think anything of it. For everyone who's creating these random stories about her being shot.
So, according to him, and according to this story, he yelled at Dylan yelled at them and then turned around and closed the door and locked it.
Has it been proven that that's actually his sheath?
Well,
you know what I mean.
There's a receipt from Amazon on April of 2022 where he purchased the K-bar and the K-bar knife sheath, and both of those items
doesn't
cannot
mean that that's his sheath, though.
Right, but both of those items can't be found. Now this sheath has his DNA on it too, so it's not just the sheath was found without anything else there, and the victims were killed by a fixed blade knife. Now, from my understanding, and depending on how advanced the Idaho State Lab is or how far they are,
Leave that meeting satisfied.
I don't, when you're not get all of your questions answered, obviously you're not satisfied. So it's one of those things where we're hopeful and we're optimistic. And we want them to catch the person that committed these crimes.
Sidebar's Anjanette Levy sits down with Shannon Gray, the attorney for the family of slain University of Idaho student Kaylee Gonsalves, one of 4 people brutally stabbed to death. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We are continuing our coverage of the University of Idaho murder investigation. The quadruple killings of 21-year-old Kaylee Gonsalves, 21-year-old Madison Mogan, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle, and 20-year-old Ethan Chapin. Their bodies were found in their off-campus rental home out in the college town of Moscow. They were stabbed to death. It is a horrible, unsolved crime. And in this 4th week, we still have no arrests, no suspects, no recovered weapon. However, Anjanette Levy, my co-host here on Sidebar, had the chance to interview Shannon Gray, the attorney for the family of Kaylee Gonsalves. Now, we know that the Gonsalves family, particularly Kaylee's father, Stephen, has been quite vocal with the media about his frustrations with the progress of this case. He had mentioned that they hired a private investigator, and I even recall when he announced that they planned to hire a lawyer. I'd say the basic concern that he has expressed is a lack of transparency from law enforcement and miscommunications. But before we get into any of that, Anjanette first asked Mr. Gray, how's the family doing?
They're in grief. They're grieving. They're trying to handle and manage a lot of things. And, they've hired me to kind of guide them through this criminal justice process and how complicated it is. If you've never been involved in it before, then you don't know anything about it. You don't know the questions to ask, things like that. They've gotten probably 20 to 25 media requests a day. And they still have to live their lives. They have to work. They have to raise their other children. They have to do those things. And so, it's been, the family and I are a team. We work together, and I'm just helping them through this process. So.
And that is completely understandable. And I also want to mention something else that Mr. Gray brought up, and it's important. And that is the intense criticism that has been leveled at the Gonsalves family, particularly Mr. Gonsalves. Because what we've been seeing online and even on media outlets are people taking aim at him specifically. And while there is perhaps a legitimate question about whether a victim's family member should be revealing information to the world during this sensitive time in an investigation, it's a whole other thing for people to come up and attack and harass him. There are even rumors online suggesting the worst. They're accusing him of being involved in what happened, which is just absolutely terrible. So before we go any further into this interview, I think it is very important to hear what Mr. Gray had to say about that.
You know, the families are going through a tragedy right now, and it's emotional, it's raw, and there are some media outlets that are picking apart interviews that the Gonsalves family has done, Steve, or anyone else. And I would like to say that, you know, if you are in a position where you are going after the families of individuals that their daughter was murdered, you need to take a real hard look at yourself and not do that anymore. The other part of it is that there shouldn't be news platforms that are giving those people talking points, and that they need to be aware of those things. So, you know, they can say whatever they want, because we should show some compassion, some kindness, and some understanding towards all of the victims' families through this really troubling time that they're going through. It's a story for a lot of people, but it's a life. This is a life tragedy for the families. So just making people aware of that.
All right, so now let's get into the frustrations with law enforcement. Between not releasing enough information about what is happening or this mixed messaging, this has led to people losing confidence in the authorities. And this has also spawned conspiracy theories. Sometimes when you don't have enough information, there's too much information. Well, Mr. Gray talked about meeting with the different members of law enforcement and these authorities, and here's what happened.
Well, we had a meeting with the investigators on Monday. The investigators, the prosecutor, Chief Fry was there, as a few other people in the room. And, you know, our theme going into that was accountability and communication. Accountability, meaning that a lot of the information that had gotten out had been inconsistent and confusing, not only to the families, but also to, I think, the public. You had the coroner making statements. You had the Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, making statements about targeting, and then that was walked back by Chief Fry in another statement. You had Art Bedke, you know, within a day or two making statements about crime of passion, and so a lot of inconsistencies in that. You know, consistency promotes trust, and so, you know, part of our theme going in was that, you know, there needs to be some accountability within the investigation about having really one voice. And that, you know, they made a lot of decisions during the investigation to do things or not to do things regarding help, you know, reaching out to the public and having the public help them during the investigation. And we wanted some answers to there. I came in with a full page, 5 pages of answers of questions, and we walked out with not much being answered at all. The second part was communication. They've done a really poor job of communicating with the Gonsalves family. And most of the families, and so we wanted to make sure that they were now aware that what our expectations were. That it's the investigation, the families, and then the media. The Gonsalves family should never hear anything on a press release or social media release or anything like that we don't know of first. Yeah, I mean, I hope they're receptive. I hope that they're mature enough to be able to take some criticism and understand that some of the expectations and that we have. And, you know, I wasn't popular when I left that meeting, by any means.
The media talking about the toxicology reports, the extreme nature of the case, the possible murder weapon. Mr. Gray was not too happy about her comments.
Well, I mean, I have issues with the coroner. Number one, you know, expressing all of her opinions over the media. at, I think, at inappropriate times, number one. Number two, making a personal phone call and describing graphic details of what she discovered and what she, to the family, I don't think was beneficial in any way. I don't think she did it out of a place of spite. I think she did it because she was, trying to give them more details. But once you hear certain details, it's not helpful to the family and certain things. So, and I could go on and on about the coroner, the idea that she's a criminal defense attorney at the same time that she's a coroner, the fact that she's continuing to defend people during this investigation. And she's done it before. I mean, the fact is that she was involved in she was a coroner on a murder investigation in Moscow years ago. And she also was the defense counsel on the case, which blows my mind.
Yeah, that conflict of interest could be a problem, for sure. That case that he mentioned, we believe, is the James Curtis Leonard case. You can definitely check it out to see Mabbitt's role there. But he wasn't shy about criticizing her actions. Now, he did say that law enforcement hasn't indicated a suspect to the family, that they're keeping things close to the vest. He wasn't shy about criticizing her actions. Now, he did say that law enforcement hasn't indicated a suspect to the family, that they're keeping things close to the vest. Now, he did say that law enforcement hasn't indicated a suspect to the family, that they're keeping things close to the vest. Including about that white Hyundai Elantra that police had asked the public's help in identifying. They said it was near the crime scene at the time of the killings. Anything anybody knows about the car or the occupants of the car. I will tell you this, according to Ann Jeanette, the Moscow County Police informed her that they are getting useful tips on that Hyundai Elantra.
Well, through our tips, through our leads, some of the evidence that came in, we start to identify patterns. And that even though there's sometimes a fascination with a particular case, some people simply don't see the news and may not know that we're looking for it. So if we get the word out there, hey, maybe your neighbor has one in the garage that they don't drive very often. Maybe there's one that's just not on the registration database. Let us know. So far, we have a list of approximately 22,000 registered white Hyundai Elantras that fit into our criteria that we're sorting through. That's an awful lot of information, but it may not be all of them. So the public can help us with that.
And Mr. Gray finally said that the reason a reward hasn't been put out for more information is because police were concerned that it's too early in the investigation to do that. That if they put out a reward, there could be a flood of non-useful information and leads. And as we continue to report on this case, we encourage anyone with useful information to call the tip line, the Moscow County Police tip line at 208-883-7180. You can email tipline at ci.moscow.id.us. And digital media submissions can go to fbi.gov/Moscow, Idaho.
And like we said earlier, we are confident that the occupant or occupants of that vehicle have information that's critical to this investigation.
It just kind of seemed like she was just trying to implement everybody that everybody thinks may be involved. Everyone from Emma Bailey to Demetrius to Who knows?
And that's what I mentioned that in Dagos earlier. I was like, it's literally like she went to Chat GPT and said, write me a narrative based on every conspiracy and rumor that has ever been created in the IDAHO4 case on every social media platform ever. And that's what she's been repeating. It's just a crazy mishmash of literally everything that we've been hearing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you there. You know, if that was out there, I mean, I just feel like, you know, a lot of people will look at this case and say that there was a lot of mistakes made. You know, you have, you know, they'll look at Brian Coburn and be like, oh man, I don't think he would have made this dumb mistake to have driven a car that belonged to him there, to turn his phone off during the crime, to leave the sheath behind. You know, let's take at the end of but the thing is, somebody did do those things. Somebody did leave a sheath behind. Somebody did drive a white Elantra without a front license plate in the area. Why are we surprised if those dumb mistakes were made that somebody was caught? I guess maybe it's because it wasn't what people were expecting.
Well, the mistakes that were made are the things that are like tripping me up the most. And that's just like honesty. I just don't, I mean, that's why when it comes to court, I'm hoping that they actually can prove some sort of connection to something. And this is the reason. Kaylee was not supposed to be there. She had hesitation about going back. And he does not handle his phone situation after he leaves his apartment. That was like slip up number one, is that he either didn't leave it there or he turned it off after he left. And that's why we even knew he left his apartment in the first place. And the only thing I could think of with those connecting is that he knew he had no choice because she was only there for that night and it was last minute. And maybe that's why he could have made the mistakes, because the timing was just too, because she wasn't, I don't know. There's just it's the mistakes that someone with 10 years of doing all this, that, you know, like you even mentioned, was highly regarded by his professors, was recommended for things that literally, you know, handfuls of people get accepted for, to drive your own vehicle, to, you know, end up on all these cameras, to not turn off your phone until after you leave your apartment on the way to what you're doing. I mean, it's just so many mistakes that just don't seem to fit is really my biggest issue with just the academia that we've heard, just all the academics with him.
Right. But there is a difference between, you know, learning something and then putting it into practice. Like, for instance, when if we were to break down the Linda Lane footage, and not necessarily the audio, but just the visual aspect of it, I think there's a lot that you can take out of that video. And you accompany it with the probable cause affidavit. So this person passed around 3 different times, right? Between 329 and 404. And then at 404 is when he did the 4th pass around. Now, if we watch that Linda Lane footage, it wasn't until the 405 pass around that he starts to act a little bit erratic. He does a turnaround at 500 apartment 52, 500 Queen Road. And then he tries to park in front of the house, but unsuccessfully does so. And then he does a 3-point turn and comes back. Now, all those things happen after a specific time. That time is after 4 o'clock. Now, we know at 4 o'clock that Xana is getting a DoorDash delivery. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't believe you can choose your DoorDash deliverer. So given the fact that this house is in a weird location and it could be confusing for a delivery person to find it, I would assume that, especially if this was a total Xana move, as was mentioned before, that she was, it was typical for her to order late. I would assume that she would know that it'd probably behoove of her to turn on a light or something to indicate where her house is at for the DoorDasher not to get confused. So I find it odd that the coincidence is that after the 4 o'clock reception of that DoorDash is when this vehicle starts to act erratic. Now, this is complete speculation on my part, but what I think happened is at 4 o'clock, that DoorDash item is received, and whatever was left to indicate that their house was where the DoorDash was to be received was turned off, whether it be a light inside, a light outside, whatever the case may be. Now, at that point, this became real to whoever is operating that vehicle, and you start to see some crazy stuff. You know, this person had driven by there 3 different times, and each time had driven to the back of this apartment complex, driven by this the victim's residence, and drove away. After the DoorDash item is dropped, are picked up. This person is now doing some weird turns, can't park, doing a 3-point turn, comes back around. You hear a horn at 407. I honestly think that vehicle is coming back around to park at 407. And that horn is also him nervous, maybe moving things from the passenger seat to get ready to make entry into this residence. But you can see as the moment that this becomes real, all his training, all the planning that this person has put is starting to unravel right away. So this person can't even park. I do not find it impossible that he's going to leave something behind. Even BTK left a gun behind and had to go back and get it. So, you know, when things are going awry and things are going crazy, I mean, this leads me to believe that the person that committed this crime and the manner in which they were driving, they're already showing signs of mistakes happening, and they haven't even entered the house yet.
Mm-hmm.
Kim originally called into the Drunk Turkey show, and they did a good job of vetting her.
There was certain validation that needed to be done. Now, the person that called us in stated that she had a daughter and a son that attended WSU, and they had friends and a roommate that were close to the situation.
I called the FBI on the 13th, actually, because I knew my daughter received the text. That is all true. She had received the text by 10 a.m.
Because it's certain that they were going to do a hit piece, which is why I said to them, I want you to conclude everything I said about you guys, the YouTubers that I trust in this, because it's not fair not to.
Right. Well, I'll give you a little tidbit. I emailed them to not use me. I had a feeling, and I thought I had told you. I swore I told you that. I'd be careful
maybe you
with
did.
it.
I don't know.
Yeah. I was like, hey, I wouldn't do it. I don't want to be in it. I don't want my name coming out in it. I don't want anything to do with anything from any other mainstream media or large network. After the last 2 times, you know, where they manipulated what myself or Big Blue had said, and you know, completely threw us under the bus for something that we didn't talk about. You know, for those that aren't aware, you know, the Washington Post and Dateline kind of gave us the runaround. Yeah, they told us they wanted to.
I was appalled, but I thought that is actually not who they are. Like, who they are. It's not who you are, right? It's not even. You'll say to me, "No, Kim, I think you're wrong," publicly, and I'll be like, "But maybe," and we'll discuss it, right? You're not that guy that's like. They're trying to what they're trying to do, I think, is promote mainstream media and say YouTube's the problem or whatever.
Right.
Social media is the problem.
Right. Well,
that's not fair.
Right. What they're saying is, and what they were showing as well, from what I could take, was that there are a lot of misinterpretations of some of the information that is out there. Like, for instance, I saw in one part of the show where it stated that that due to a forensic download of Dylan and Bethany's phones was one of the reasons why they were able to determine what time that the murders had taken place. And one of the influencers said, "Oh, they're texting each other," and I'm like, "That's not what it says. It says a forensic download." What that forensic download could be, or could be notifying him, is something as simple as if, Dylan woke up and heard some noise and she checked her phone to see what time it was, and it activated from being, laying on its back, not doing anything, to now it's up forward and it's being turned on and there's a specific time there. Right. So, it was a little bit of some jumps to conclusions, and they were kind of putting those things out there and highlighting more so the negative aspect of online, sleuthing and stuff like that. However, you don't ever see when they get things wrong, right? Like, because I saw, it was a News Nation when there was some lady claiming to be in the cell right across the hall from BK, and she came out on News Nation saying that he was yelling, "I'm gonna cut you and I'm gonna do this," and it came out to be 100% nonsense.
100% untrue. Correct. 100% nonsense.
And so they try to portray, YouTubers and or content creators or anybody who wants to talk about the case as people that are just going off the deep end. And when it's some of it is a misinterpretation of some of the information that's out there, and I do think that there was a need to be first when it came to coming out with content, and sometimes when doing so, it's not as accurate as if somebody were to sit down and read it through a couple of times and then put it out.
My daughters and her friends, I'm never showing them.
All right, so without divulging names, maybe just kind of describe if they're a student or if they're friends of someone. Question is, where did you hear the rumors about the conditions of the victims? I don't want you to go into those conditions.
Police department.
Oh, so the police department told you
ISP,
personally?
Do you remember the ISP officer that was, we had an ISP officer, I guess, assigned to us to speak with me. I called about a ring.
Mm-hmm.
Girls in the sorority wear a little ring, typically. And I wanted to make sure that Jasmine got Xana's ring.
Question is, where did you hear the rumors about the conditions of the victims? I don't want you to go into those conditions.
Police department.
Oh, so the police department told you
ISP,
personally?
Do you remember the ISP officer that was, we had an ISP officer, I guess, assigned to us to speak with me, because I would want Peyton's ring to go to her sister. And it just kind of one thing led to another, and he just had the conversation with me. And he gave me the information. That's where I found out about it. It was just, I was asking about a ring to make sure that it went to her, to Jasmine.
You said this was an ISP officer?
He was an ISP officer, yes, correct.
For UI, and supposedly he had spent the night at my daughter's house, but again, we were in a hotel in Pullman. I never saw him. I never saw. So, but then when I called at 5 o'clock, when we got the alert on the way home, she knew everything that had happened. And down to like the injuries and where the kids were, and that Dylan and Bethany were in the downstairs room. They knew the guys who were there. It wasn't just one. They knew who they were. There was a lot of loud noise, and they locked themselves in their rooms and went to sleep. I said, or we're hiding, whatever. But I said, why didn't they call the police? She goes, I don't know. And like, I just really still can't get my head around that. And I know you're frightened, but they were not terrified. Like, what the police report said at the probable cause warnings is not what these kids were all told.